Okay, street talk time, and two stories really.
This was a heavy week.
It was. I mean, in a different way to say the Yasmin week, which was 2-3 weeks ago. But yeah, two main stories, and it was. I didn't know which one to put as our headliner.
Right.
For today, but I'm sticking with what I had already, which is a serious case of the Ollie Wobbles first, because that definitely was big. It took over the first half of the week at least, but the Bailey story, which really came to a head today, was also pretty affecting, particularly as they dedicated the whole second half of today's episode just to that one story. Similar, I guess, to how they did with the Yasmin episode. So interesting that they're kind of exploring those different ways to really push the big important stories to the forefront. So we'll do the Ollie Wobbles first, and then we called it Don't Be Mean last week, but Don't Be Racist this week, because he thinks
Don
he
is racist.
He might not think he is, just having a joke. But
I can't believe anybody in this day and age can think that they're not racist if they say things like that. But okay.
I think he must know he is, but if you get accused of that, you're just naturally going to say, no, I'm not.
Well, I think maybe you think, well, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah. I'm not the one putting the dog poo through their letterbox, so I'm not racist.
It's just taking the mick out of people.
I'm not saying it to his face.
Well, move on.
We'll come back. Yeah. Then we've got there was a bit of winter blues this week. Tiny bit of the Evelyn and Arthur storyline, even tinier bit of the David story. But I think these first two are going to take up quite a bit of our discussion time first. So we'll start off with Leanne and Steve and Ollie. And the cliffhanger on Friday last week was that Ollie had been brought into Weatherfield General with his worst seizure yet, and they just couldn't get him to stop. But fortunately, that was solved pretty quickly at the beginning of Monday's episode, because they don't need a cliffhanger anymore because the episode started. So he's like, okay, I'll stop my season now, but they're going to go and take him for an MRI scan later, so it's still looking pretty serious. Tracy's still saying, well, got to be epilepsy, hasn't it? Which was just basically soap code for it's definitely not epilepsy. There was a scene with Toya and Liz back at the flat after that, and Liz is completely she's fraught with worry about the whole situation. She wonders, why are they taking him for all these different scans? Why aren't they telling us everything yet? Is there something? There must be something in particular they're looking for, and I think that's all something that many of us have worried about or had experiences in the past, where doctors don't want to tell you everything until they've got the bigger picture, and because they don't want to get you off thinking one way or Googling, like was a part of the story this week. But so I thought that was very relatable, Liz's reaction, and Toya has to put on a brave face as well, because she's obviously going through a lot as well, what with this being her nephew. But she's quite supportive to Liz, which is lovely. And I'd forgotten as well, with Toya and Liz, they used to be work colleagues too. Not that we really ever saw much of Toya there, but you kind of think, well, that they must have had quite a relationship for that 2 years that they were mates there. Tracy's back in the hospital, realising that it's not actually looking too good, is it? And then finally we get to see from Dr. Ward, who reports back to Leanne and Steve about changes that she's detected in the back of Oliver's brain, and now she wants to do genetic blood test. They say it's I can't remember whether it was Monday or last week that it was first brought up, the idea of it being genetic. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was last week.
So
and people kept saying, I had this,
yeah,
and
that's
I had
right.
that.
Yeah, Andy had seizures on as a baby, and Jim's got this, and Steve brings it up again, and she's like, it doesn't seem to be following the same patterns as what your dad had.
And Nick's like, I was in a car crash once, and I've got a brain injury, and they're like, Nick,
you're not related,
Nick.
Nothing
to do with you.
Just rubbing it in, Nick. You're nothing to do with this baby.
Oh my god.
Liz goes to the cafe and finds Simon and Amy and Emma very, very conveniently all together around a table in the cafe, and catches them up with what's going on. They're obviously pretty shocked to realise just how bad this is looking. And then she and Toya arrive at the hospital. Nick's there with Ollie, and there's I felt really bad for Nick this week.
This was really interesting to me because Nick is the outsider in this.
Yeah.
And they did a really great job of...
I think so.
Building sympathy for him as sort of looking at it from a you know, not the inner circle, but still being invested emotionally in the child. And
yeah, it was very, you know, very modern story, reflection of the fact that, you know, the nuclear family isn't prevalent.
The nuclear family hasn't existed in Weatherfield since 1975.
Very true. Yeah, so he's like pouring his heart out, basically saying, I know he's not my flesh and blood, but I still love him like he was. Leanne and Steve, meanwhile, are being told that it's a genetic disease that Oliver's got.
What it is.
Yeah, it's mitochondrial disease, which they've noticed that he's got high lactate, which is leading them to think that it's mitochondrial disease. And you've done a bit of research about this, haven't you? So you can report back on your findings later, although it was a few days ago. Anyway, she gives them a bit of a science lesson about it and says, look, stay off the... Don't go Googling it. Don't go looking online for any answers or advice or anything, apart from if you go to itv.com/advice, because we got sponsored from Compare the Meerkat there. So that's how we get our hospital funds. Wednesday, Leanne and Steve have been up all night at the hospital. Tracy shows up there, and I thought there was it was in the corridor. Tracy turns up and she just has a hug with Steve outside, and I think she's been quite restrained for Tracy in this story. She can be serious when she needs to be. I think she knows when it's not
time
the
to
time.
knock it on the head.
Yeah. Back on the street, Nick's telling Gail that Leanne still hasn't rung him yet, and he's clearly overwhelmed by the whole situation. And Gail says, look, I'll open up the factory, you go and sort this out, and Leanne will cope. It's a difficult situation for her as well, remember, but you just need to keep loving her and supporting her, and you'll get through this together. So he goes over to the hospital, and Leanne gives him a big old hug and says, oh, it's all my fault. Why didn't I notice anything sooner?
I felt so bad for her, because it really did, you know, could totally understand how upset she was, and she blamed herself because she thought
everyone's reactions seemed very natural in this.
If I had only known before now, we could have fixed this. And the sad fact of the matter is you couldn't have done anything.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any better.
Steve, meanwhile, has gone against the advice of Dr. Ward and has started voggling it. And he's like, oh, it says here that there's different levels of the condition. So, you know, we don't know what sort it is that Ollie's got. He just wants answers, doesn't he? He's kind of, in the role of...
information.
Yeah, exactly. So they go and see Dr. Ward again, and they can't say 100% it's mitochondrial disease, as they were told on Monday, or if it is, what type it could be. And Steve's just like, I need to know if my son is going to live or die, because he's been thinking, that's what he's been thinking. But then Leanne, who's probably been thinking it as well, but to hear it out loud.
It's kind of like her worst fears materialised in that moment.
It's almost like she's been thinking it, and if Steve's thinking it too, then it must be true that Ollie's going to die.
She hasn't looked it up and he has, so she might be thinking, God, he knows about this, and they're not telling us because they don't want us to worry, but he's going to die. Yeah. And she just freaks out and leaves.
Yeah, so they have a bit of a catch-up in the corridor later, and Steve says that these doctors, they know something they're not letting on. Who knows? Maybe, but that's what you'd think. If you're not getting answers, you think that people are hiding things from you.
Tell you at that precise moment, you know, I don't know all the facts, but here's stuff to worry about. Yeah,
exactly. And Leanne says, look, we just need to trust her, and it's all very fraught. I didn't get, and maybe I need to rewatch this, the scenes with Gail and Liz and Amy, and Liz is looking after Amy in her grandmotherly role, and Gail finds them in the cafe later and is saying, are there any news and about this genetic disease that Ollie's got? And it seems like she's put her foot in her mouth about it, about mentioning what it is or what it might be in front of Amy.
Maybe it's also because Amy might start to worry, oh gosh, what if I've got it?
Yeah.
If I got it off my dad, and I know my dad's got this and my granddad's got that.
I think that they might have tested Amy for it when she was a baby. I can't say for sure, but...
Yeah, but that's for something different, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But that doesn't really get picked up for the rest of the week, so I guess that might...
They might, if it's relevant, they'll bring it back up again.
Probably. Yeah. So then there's a scene in the hospital that ends the episode where Steve and Leanne are with Ollie in the bed, and Nick's kind of at the foot of the bed feeling like a total spare wheel. And Steve and Leanne are talking about Ollie's childhood, well, even earlier childhood, because he's still just wee little lad at the moment, and they're talking about this clown toy that they used to call George Clowney, which I thought was great.
I bet you did.
And they're pun maestros, and they're laughing about this, and which again is, I think, natural to want to find the humour in places.
Well, they're just retreating to happy memories, but Nick feels a bit like that it's the funeral and they're talking about Ollie's life and having a wake, and he just can't cope with them talking and laughing about it. Yeah,
so he sort of drops off to the corridor, and then Leanne comes out with him, and they have a bit of an argument.
Well, don't forget also that Nick really, like we said, I just said he's had this brain injury, and the mechanics of it have never been properly explained on the show, because it's very convenient for whenever they want him to be rude or whatever, or angry about something, he'll just blame it on that. But perhaps this brain injury is making it more difficult for him to contain his emotions.
They haven't mentioned that yet, have
they?
But
I think Nick's a very impulsive character, and it all stems from that brain thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether the writers have forgotten that's what, or they just think it's part of his personality.
No, I think they'll bring it up, because it certainly seems like Nick is an important character in this story.
Well, I know, but it's not
more so than Tracy. It's not about Nick, but I think Nick's role is...
That's what I'm just saying. Like this, he's sitting there and he just literally bursts out of the room because he can't do it.
And he's like, how can you be laughing at a time like this? And she says, look, this is just about Oliver. This is about me, Steve, Oliver's mum and dad trying to get through a horrendous situation that we're in. And he's like, oh, his mum and dad, well, what am I then? And she's like, I don't care what you are right now. And makes him go.
That was awful.
Awkward. But,
no, awful, not awkward.
But again, very...
Oh, totally.
Very natural, because her little kid's life could be on the line
she's
here.
Like, I don't have time to babysit your emotional state at the moment. I'm the one that's
petty.
But he's still going through something as well. It's so awful.
Yeah,
being on the periphery of a family tragedy and feeling emotion and sadness, but knowing that how you feel is nowhere near how everyone else feels. But you can't, feeling like you're not it's not your place to share in the grief, but it is. It's just a different level. Yeah,
and we had a couple of scenes on Friday from this, although it was the Bailey story that took the lion's share. Toya turns up at the hospital, and Leanne's just she lets it all out, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's been keeping it together a little bit, but with her sister there, she kind of poured her heart out a bit, and Toya gives a bit of a supporting hug. She's like, counselling time, here I go.
Well, she counsels her to apologise to Nick, which is quite easy because they were standing there.
Wise words, Toya. Yeah, they go out the front, don't they? And then Nick's there looking all broody. So Leanne goes over and apologises for being a cowbag, and he says, I was the cowbag. he's like, sorry. He says, I'm sorry, I'm all doom and gloom. I'm just really, really struggling with this. And they leave it as a, what are we going to do? Kind of cliffhanger that could be not resolved, but picked up as and when Coronation Street want to.
Yeah.
So, I thought this was good this week. It is miserable and depressing, and I'm hearing people saying, oh, it's another tragic story. When we talked about it last week, and does Corrie really need another tragedy and medical drama and hopeless situation that seems like there's only one way this is going to end.
Even like medical shows like Casualty are less depressing, because you don't feel that attached to the people who come in, rock up with an arrow through their eyeball.
Yeah. I'm still keeping the same stance as last week, though, which is they need to do this properly, and I think they need to kill Ollie off, as harsh as that makes me seem. And I know it does, but I don't. What? It's got to have some kind of payoff. I don't want it to be, and it was all okay.
Well, no, it's not going. I don't think it's going to be. I mean, like you said, I looked up mitochondrial disease.
So it's. I remember you saying it was something. It's something to do with the mitochondria, obviously, in the cell, which is
okay,
go on A-level biology.
I got a D in.
You got a C in A-level biology. Don't do yourself down.
I got a D in systems. Oh. I got an A in ecology because it was just like foxes eat mice. Do that bit.
But what happens if all the mice die out?
The foxes go hungry. A+. Anyway, so lots of people probably know this, but mitochondria that is the bit of the cell that produces energy for the cell. And there's two types of DNA. There's mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA, and the nuclear DNA is the one you mostly think about when you think about your DNA, because that's the bit that your cells use to make you. And mitochondria, the DNA, that comes from your mother. So
I was reading earlier as well that because mitochondria, they're producing the energy for the cells, that if there's something not right with them, as in Ollie's case, then certain sort of vital organs of the body, if they're the cells where the mitochondria are effective, don't work so well. So you haven't got as much energy for your brain, haven't got as much energy for your heart, for your liver, and so on. So these organs fail.
Catastrophic thing to have wrong with you. It's like if your engine couldn't get energy from petrol, you wouldn't be able to drive very far or very well.
Nice.
Well, the people who suffer from mitochondrial disease or have families, they call it mito, which you might hear maybe in the show at some point.
You might have heard already. Inappropriate.
Right, so this mitochondrial disease is a mutation in the mitochondria which causes a massive umbrella of different problems which manifest in different ways, can be diagnosed in different ways, different cells and different parts of the body, as you just said, can be affected. And you can grow into adulthood and not know that you've got it until it catches up with you, or you can get it when you're very, very young. And it seems as though the younger you are diagnosed with this, the younger it becomes apparent that you have a problem, the more serious the outcome is going to be. Because if you think about it as a cumulative
if it's problem, already got this bad and you're only little, then it's happening quickly.
So there's loads of different things that can be wrong with you. You can have seizures, you can have fatigue, vision problems, hearing loss, cognitive disabilities, poor growth. It can be in your brain, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your skin, and there is no cure for it. And it can, this is the problem that the doctors have. It feels like one of these things where it's an umbrella term that means loads of different things.
Like cancer.
And it manifests in different ways, and it can be awful or it can be,
Yeah. But the bottom line for Steve and Leanne in this is that this is a disease with no cure, and so it is life limiting.
Yes.
But the question is, does Ollie have a little bit of time left, or is he going to go on and lead, relatively normal life up to a certain point in the programme? Could he die before could he make it to 5, to 10, to 20? Whatever happens, this is going to be something that they're not going to be able to get away from.
Yeah, and you might think that because it's in the mitochondria, it is inherited through the mother's genes, but that's not the case every time. The mitochondrial disease can be caused by a mutation in the mitochondria from the mitochondrial DNA, or in the nuclear DNA when it replicates and makes the mitochondria, it can go wrong, or it can be spontaneous, where it just when your genes get put together, it replicates wrong and you end up.
This is a proper science lesson on getting energy. I feel like I'm in a Pantene advert. I feel like
I'm not really explaining it very well, and I'm probably definitely getting things wrong.
No, I'm the teacher here, and I'm impressed.
If you really are interested, you need to look this up, because don't just listen to a podcast about soap.
We're gonna be quoted in the references to some biology, degree dissertation now.
Yeah. Well, you heard Steve mention that there were different levels, and that just refers to what part of the mitochondria isn't working. It's nothing to do like level 4 is the best level or the worst level or anything. It's not severity, and because it is a chronic, it's progressive. It will just get worse over time. But then you can be stable for years and then just rapidly go downhill.
You mentioned earlier about people might think that it's passed down from the mother, and you were looking into that, weren't you? Because they made a big thing in Coronation Street this week of characters assuming that it came from Steve's side of the family, and you thought, well, maybe it'll transpire that it was actually from the Battersby side, or I guess from Stella or or whatever that passed it down, which could be an interesting twist. Not that it affects anything at the end of the day.
No, I mean, it's interesting to consider the fact that Leanne and Toya, between them, only have one child. And because I don't know if anyone remembers, but probably a couple of years ago I said that it would be really interesting if Coronation Street did do a story about genetically inherited diseases. And there are some that you can get where you can carry the disease and have a 50% chance of passing it on to your child. And I always thought that would be a really interesting avenue to go down, to consider when people are thinking of having children, or when a child has a disease and you can sort of pinpoint where the origin was, like the guilt that is associated with having passed on a gene to your offspring that has, could cause suffering. And
but you say that about Leanne and Toya, but let's not forget that they're not actually blood related, are they? Because
no, that's true.
Les is, I can never remember who's. Janice is Toya's mum, isn't she? And it was Janice and Ronnie someone or other, Clayton or whatever, and then Leanne's dad is Les and Stella's the mum. I think
that's true.
That's the right way around,
right.
isn't it?
But the thing is, I don't know whether Corey remembers that. But but wouldn't it have been interesting if they had been related, and then Toya might have thought to herself, my gosh,
if I'd
was
had a
that
baby,
a blessing that I couldn't have a child, or can I take comfort in that, or is that just does that make it worse in a way? I don't know.
It'd be really interesting to see Toya's reaction through this, because she's obviously had these struggles of not being able to have a baby, and that's eaten away at her. That trying to have a baby herself was her life, and then she was around. Was she there for when Leanne had a baby in the lift? Was it Toya in the lift with her? I can't remember. But she although she hasn't been able to have a child herself, she has at least had the next closest thing maybe, in that she's got a niece with a very close sister. So. And she thinks that she's seen Leanne as having this real blessing later in her life as well. So remember, Simon's not Leanne's kid. So Leanne, Toya's sister, has finally got everything that Toya has always wanted during the time she was away from the programme. And now she's going to lose it. So Leanne's going to be... It's not going through the same as Toya, but it'll be a shared grief and a shared tragedy.
You mean Toya going through what Leanne's going
through? Yeah,
shared grief.
So I wonder whether that's going to cut Nick out even further, because he wants to be there. Grieving isn't the right word when Ollie's not dead, but he wants to be.
You can grieve.
He wants to be going through it and sharing it with Leanne and being there to support Leanne. And I wonder whether Leanne's gonna push Nick out further, not just with Steve, but also with Toya, and he's going to feel like he's, third in the pecking order. Although I suppose today's scene, I don't know whether it was just done then sort of neatly to tie it up for one episode and that's it. He's going to be involved in everything now, but that doesn't feel like it's going that way.
The thing about Corrie is that there are so many complicated relationships and the actors are so good. And every story is so complicated that you could spend this whole story and just focus on Nick as the character that you follow and what he goes through experiencing this and feeling awkward on the periphery and stuff, but that's not going to happen. You just have to sort of imagine what he's going through once it's been established.
Well, I hope that there is some kind of story, because when soaps, I can't speak for other soaps, Coronation Street has a story where somebody has a disease or somebody finds they got a condition or something, sometimes they think, we don't need to put a story, it's just the characters finds that they've got some medical condition and isn't this awful for them, and then it's over. But it'd be interesting if it's more than just, look at Steve and Leanne, their kid's got this degenerative condition, isn't that awful for them? You know what I'm saying? Having the Nick angle, and maybe he'll leave Leanne, or
this is the thing. Maybe often,
Steve will get closer to Leanne, and
very often traumas like this in couples will lead to the couple breaking up. I'm thinking more of when a child dies. Marriages don't often survive that.
No,
and it's a different dynamic with Leanne and Nick, obviously they're not. Obviously Nick is not the parent, and so he's removed again. Is that going to help the relationship, or is that, you know, does that different dynamic change how easy it is to relate, or will that distance Leanne even more from Nick, and will she start to feel resentful perhaps of Nick and say, like, you know, well, it's all right for you because you're removed from this situation, you can't understand the pain that I feel.
Tell you what, as long as they don't go down the route of Nick and Tracy ending up in bed together, both feeling like just feeling like they're on the periphery, and it feels like they could.
To us. Let's go to bed together.
Yeah. No, I'm really interested in.
There's been no indication of that so far.
No, there hasn't been. Tracy's definitely been on the outskirts of it, but there's going to be something going on along the Barlow side, isn't there? Because Amy and Liz, they've been quite underused, and I wonder whether, you know, we're going to see a little bit more of that side of things in the weeks to come.
I did think it was interesting about what they were told about not Googling it.
Yeah.
I don't know how often this gets told to patients these days. I do remember when, in the early days of the internet, reading up about various things that you could be diagnosed with, and people finding out about stuff from information that was not meant for patient consumption. Like back in the early days of the internet, people weren't as savvy about who was going to read things, and often just information just meant for doctors would end up on the internet, and then patients would read it and become very, very upset. But I guess you can't really tell people not to Google stuff these days because they're going to anyway. But it does depend on what you've got. So like, when you can say, yeah, you've got this disease and it causes this, that and the other thing, you probably would say, look, find information about it, because it's clearly studied and laid out, and we know everything there is to know about this and how to combat it or not. But mitochondrial disease is so rare and so poorly understood and still being researched that there really is no useful reason for you to direct a patient to look this up. You simply cannot tell from Googling it how relevant any of it is to you.
No, but you're not going to know that until you Google it, are you? So I'm glad that Steve did Google it, because I suppose it is good for Coronation Street in this issue-based story to say, don't Google it if you think you got something, everybody. But it's good that they made Steve do it, because that's what people wouldn't. Yeah. And Steve, like many people, would think, I'll be able to understand it.
Yeah. But I think
I know I can tell what's fake on the internet and what isn't. It's fine.
And then you find yourself, Michael, it's not to do with whether it's fake or not. It's to do with whether the information is of any use to you. Like you said, the analogy to it's the same as having cancer is pretty good, really, because if somebody said you've got cancer, you could Google it and think you've got stage 4 pancreatic cancer and you're going to die the next day or something. But
I think with Steve as well, because he thinks that this has got to have come from my side of the family, and he's feeling guilty, and I suppose he's looking at what have I done? What have I caused?
Is power, and people don't like to feel. I mean, and the opposite is true. Lack of information makes you feel powerless, and they already feel powerless because they're sitting there and they can't do anything physically to help Ollie. The next thing that they can do is to arm themselves with knowledge, and I wish the doctor had said something like mitochondrial disease is a very broad term, and don't want you to look it up until we know specifically what Oliver has, because there's lots of information on there that is not going to be relevant to you. But
I do wonder where the story is going to go next.
I really think that he's going to die as well, I'm afraid.
But do you think foresee that's happening soon?
It sounds really harsh, but I hope he doesn't hang around for too long, because it's just too tragic to watch and painful and sad. It's too realistic for me. I don't like it. Like I didn't watch
the Sinead
stuff, and because I couldn't imagine how I would cope with watching a woman slowly turn from being like a happy, go lucky, sweet girl into sort of a kind of a husk of a woman waiting for her body to give up on her so her brain can be set free. I just feel the same way about watching a little kid.
And this is even worse because, like, Ollie's not going to know what's going on, and Sinead at least knew what was coming, so she could prepare herself for it in a way.
Yeah, but Ollie... it's the same situation of, like, it's too soon. It's not fair. Then you kind of imagine you're going to get a certain lot in life of years, and even if you're being pessimistic, you kind of give yourself a bit more than I'm not going to reach 10.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
horrific.
I'm looking forward to. I think it's definitely going to be an opportunity for all the main players to show what they can do in the old acting stakes. Simon Gregson is still doing all right, I think, this week.
He is as well.
And Jane, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so long since she's had a big story, and I think she might say that this is one of her most important stories. And I mean, the actors always say that when they're given the issues-based stories to do, aren't they? Because it's about making a difference. I think Ian McLeod, in an interview that I read earlier today, was saying, I wanted to raise awareness of this because a lot of people don't know about mitochondrial disease, and this might raise more funds for it. I think that was key, because sometimes it's like, well, it's raising awareness of this, so what? Now I know about it, okay. But the fact that maybe it will get more funding towards researching this condition, that could be a positive that comes out of it. And it'd be interesting as well if they're not planning to kill off Ollie in the immediate future, maybe in the years to come they will have some kind of treatment or cure or for it. And
well, that's always what the doctors tell you, but
I know, but it'd be interesting and to if it's looking bleak and tragic now, and real life circumstances change, which mean that in the future Ollie can, stay alive, and I think that would be quite uplifting. But you can't bank on that, can you, if you're a storyliner? So good stuff all around.
You sound
tragic.
like one of the most optimistic people in the world. Like, I'm going to write a story about mitochondrial disease in the show to raise funds so that my character doesn't have to die of something, because they'll have found a cure because they raised all the money thanks to my story on Coronation Street.
Well, you never know.
You never know.
The Hayley story helped bring about the Gender Recognition Act. That's all I'm saying. Things have happened. Stranger things have happened.
Well, wouldn't that be a lovely thought if that could happen? If they could find some magic cure that would stop this from happening. It's too sad to think about.
I'm very interested to see how all the different characters react to this. I'm a little worried about Gail, and because how she's been in the show recently, and is she going to not take it silly? And I mean, David, was he even in it this week? He's not been. I don't think he's been involved at all, but I mean, he's got his own issues to deal with Jonah and everything. But I'll be interested to see how he takes it as well, and whether he ends up being a shoulder to cry on for Nick, because they have got
just as much as being supportive and helpful, people are just as likely to try to ignore the problem and avoid the people that are suffering through it to protect themselves from their sad feelings, and because they just don't know how to cope and how to react, and that's just as much that happens to people that are sick. They get almost shunned really by people because we're too worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, or we want to protect ourselves and pretend it's not happening.
Right, well, let's move on to the next heavy storyline of the week, Don't Be Racist, which culminated in today's special episode, which was originally supposed to be broadcast on 22nd of April, which is Stephen Lawrence Day, and it was written in collaboration with Stephen Lawrence's mum, Baroness Lawrence, don't you know? So it was quite a special one, and I personally think it worked pretty well. But
are you going to talk about who Stephen Lawrence is?
It was a case where somebody was a black man was murdered, and it's about police negligence and inherent racism with the police, isn't it? And again, you can
it brought a horrible truth to light that many white people didn't realise was going on.
Yes,
and this was similar a theme on Friday, where it was revealed to some people perhaps that the the rosy racism free world that they thought they lived in didn't exist.
Exactly.
So on Monday,
this is me.
No, you just did.
Oh, did I do Ollie Wobbles? Oh,
yeah,
I
you did the whole
didn't I?
thing, even though you said I was going to do it.
Oh, you do this then.
I will. That's what I was just about to do. Thank you. So on Monday, James is all het up about what happened last week, about the fan being horrible to him.
So this was the second half of that episode, wasn't it? So it was like,
and Tim's like,
today.
Just ignore them. And James is like, I'd never thought of it that way, Tim. You're so wise. You're so wise being a white straight man who's never experienced prejudice. Thank you. Don, who is the manager of the Bistro, who I hope is going to be fired by, what's his name? Ray. Look, what horrible things has Ray done?
He touched Michelle's leg.
Yeah, he's a pervert, isn't he? And he's a ruthless businessman. But is he a harbinger of racists? We'll find out next week, I assume. I hope Don isn't in it next week. I can't see why he would be kept on after what happened on Friday. Anyway, so Don is the manager in charge of the Bistro, and they're finishing off the redesign of the place for the opening at the end of the week. And Michael and Ed are involved as the builders to get everything up to scratch. And Don keeps coming to them with all these jobs that he thinks they haven't done properly. And Ed's like, well, I'll just resign myself to get on with getting this done. But Michael's very frustrated and he wants a break. And Don says, oh, Generation Snowflake, you're triggered and stuff. And Michael drops off, and then Don says to Ed, oh, you can't say anything without causing offence these days, and clearly establishing himself as a tone-deaf moron who just echoes things he's seen people saying on Twitter. Michael goes home and he starts banging on to Aggie about why Ed wouldn't stand up for himself and was just letting Don walk all over him. Then we have further trouble in the Bailey household when James says that his manager has threatened to transfer him to another team because of the
incident.
The incident, and it really isn't good. Like, apparently it's fine for fans to attack footballers, but if the footballers say anything back, then that's bad decorum and they have to be transferred somewhere else. And Aggie says that talk to him and try and sort something out. But by dinner time, Michael's still wound up about this. And Ed says, sometimes it's just best to ignore these things. And Aggie says, yeah, you need to learn to ignore these people. And Michael doesn't want to accept this. And he's not happy. No, and they just have this really awkward meal where they're all just silence. Like, oh, I can't, it doesn't seem that we can agree on the best way to proceed. So on Wednesday, Wednesday and Friday's episodes were the same day, but broadcast on 2 different days. So the Bistro opening do is that night, and Aggie is like, look, we just want to go to this thing and enjoy ourselves and relax and not make a fuss about anything.
Eat some nice spring rolls. Oh, we can't. Thanks, Gemma, for stealing them all.
Oh, brilliant.
That was a funny little moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, Faye brought over, at the do, Faye brought Gemma over the platter to take one, and she just took the whole thing and started tucking in. So Aggie wants Michael to bring Tiana along. So that's Michael's daughter with Grace, who he doesn't see very much of.
No, Grace is like a once a month or two appearance. She's like, I thought I can't remember when it was she first came in. It was October, November or something. And it felt like a story was just starting, but they're really, really drip feeding.
They're like, we're not sure about this character.
Although it did turn a corner today.
It did develop quite strongly. James says he hasn't made the squad, so he's not going to be playing, and everyone's like, oh, this is really awkward. And then Ed's like, James needs to toughen up, and I really liked the way that these themes of homophobia and racism met each other and made sense of each other. And it didn't, and up until this point, it felt a bit like they were just throwing everything at the Bailey family and not linking them together. But clearly this was part of the plan to sort of confront the racism. They had tried a little bit before to reconcile these two things in Ed and sort of make him realise that they're both the same. But it never really went anywhere until this Friday, and I really thought that they did a great job on linking them together.
Yeah, I mean, I think Baileys need a bit of a break from the issues stories, because that seems to be all they're getting. But
I agree.
You're right. I think
it was apparent to everybody else except Ed how similar these problems were.
It's just,
and on
both
Friday
prejudice.
the penny dropped, and he finally got what James has been trying to tell him this whole time.
Yeah.
And it felt a bit like we had the end of a chapter here, and perhaps we're not going to pick this up again for maybe ever. But it felt like we had a good conclusion.
Yeah, it doesn't need to carry on. I mean, let's get to the end of it.
So James needs to toughen up, says Ed, about being attacked for being gay. Michael is trying to take the day off work so that he can get this toy rabbit for Tiana, and he tries to talk to Ed about easing off of James, but Ed's not really interested in discussing this. Ed is living his childhood through James. He wants James to achieve everything that he felt he couldn't when he was younger, and so when James fails, Ed feels it more personally, I think. Very tough. Kirk is very wise. I think there was a lot of twee. It felt like children's TV platitudes about racism and ignorance. I felt a bit patronised this week. Wise Kirk is like, people who say horrible things about James say more about themselves than they do about you. It's like, thank you very much, but you're not the target of this, and perhaps you would feel differently if somebody was saying this to you. Michael comes in, and James is at the bar drinking, and he's like, this is not going to help you out. You're throwing it all away now. And James really does feel like he's given up. He feels like he's not going to be a footballer anymore, so he might as well get drunk and forget all of his diets and his special regimens and all that stuff. So on Friday, this was the very special episode of Coronation Street, the prejudice episode, and we had James. We had lots of montages of various dramas. Yeah,
there was hospital drama and Bailey drama.
Yeah.
It almost felt like the beginning of a Christmas episode, didn't it? Just slow
very
cuts,
festive
faded,
racism. James looking at old photos of himself with doing football stuff.
Yeah, and all the sound effects are in the background, wasn't there? It was I was like, oh, don't do that, Coronation Street.
James tells Michael that he is going to quit being a footballer. He's sick of it. And Michael can't believe this. He rushes off to tell Ed about it in the bistro. And then Don comes over again. He said some racist things on Monday
and last week. They've had him drop these,
Lenny Henry, anything to do with his stereotypes of what black people do or say or look like. He'll just drop it into the conversation like it's a funny joke. So he says, when he sees Michael come in, he calls him Fresh Prince. And then he says, oh, you're going to go home and have a little drop of rum and your chicken and rice and peas. And Michael's just had enough at this point. He's stressed about everything. And then he's standing there watching him and his dad get insulted by this ignorant moron who hasn't even got any creative insults. They're all the worst kind of cliched rubbish I've ever heard.
They are a bit. I felt that by today's ones, they almost didn't need to have him say anything more. It was like, I get it. He's saying these things, and it felt like that.
It gets worse. It gets worse. So Michael's like, Dad, how can you stand there and watch this? And there was a really weirdly badly cut bit where 1 second Don's there saying, go in for your rice and peas, and the next minute Michael and Ed are having a conversation like he's not there, and then it becomes apparent that he has gone.
He just disappeared in a puff of smoke.
He literally just disappeared, and the only concession they made to letting us know this was a very faint footstep sound effect, but I think that was cut weirdly. Yeah. So they're now alone, and Michael has to go at Ed for not reacting, and Ed's like, I've been fighting my whole life actually. And he sort of pulls his t-shirt down and shows him, look, this is where I got attacked by a bunch of white kids with snooker cues. This is what, you know, I broke my arm, I broke this, I broke that. I have been standing up, I've been fighting all my life. And I really get, like, they didn't push it too far, but you got the impression that he was sort of saying, I fought my whole life, I've got to this stage now, and he's just saying stupid things like, which is not going to hurt you. I've literally been physically attacked by people because they're racist, and you're moaning about had a few stupid words thrown in your face. It felt a bit like he was saying it could be much worse, and it has got better, and I've given up the fight now.
Yeah,
you know?
it's also, you can try and fight, but you're never gonna stop
people.
The underlying racism in certain people.
Yeah, and it really is interesting too, because Michael was born into a world where he doesn't expect to be treated like that, but it felt to me like Ed was saying, at this moment in the show, I've accepted this level. This is where I'm gonna stop my fight, because this isn't as bad as it could be. And now he changes his mind during this episode, but that's what I felt was being said here. And I thought that his change of heart came from what Michael said, if you give up now, you're just leaving the fight for someone else. And he's saying that as a father of a young child. And he's thinking, if I just let this happen, is Tiana going to have to listen to this when she's grown up? Is she going to have a kid that's going to have the same problem? Or can we stand up for ourselves and say this isn't okay?
Yeah, it's a never surrender, isn't it?
Ray pays... Well, this is the thing, like I said before, we had this conversation when James was talking about homophobia, and who's to say that it's your job to fight against it because you're the victim of it. And it's exhausting because it happens all the time, every day.
Yeah.
And it's all very well saying, you know, you should fight against it everywhere you see it, but it is exhausting. So then we get a scene where Ray's paying Ed for his work and inviting him to the opening, and we have a really... On second thoughts, I thought this was really good, but the first time I saw it, I thought it was a bit cheesy, because we have Ed sort of standing there morosely, and then the camera pans and the lights change, and he's suddenly in the party.
Yeah, it's like
it's like passage of time, but he hasn't moved.
Which
I guess is kind of
it was quite clever.
It's like symbolic of the fact that his mind has been frozen on that moment that he had in that room where he was belittled in front of his own son by a man and decided not to stand up for himself, and he's been dwelling on that the whole time.
Yeah,
and he's like frozen in time, and then we pick up with him at the party, and you can tell, I think, that it's been playing on his mind. And he says, Aggie comes over and she knows about the aggro that's been going on with Don, and she wants to know who he is. And he says, don't worry about her, we're just here for a good time. Then we cut to Don, who's got this equally moronic friend, and he sees that Michael's brought his kid, and he's like, oh, we're the whole tribe are here now. And obviously the connotations there are multitudes of connotations, you know, about people having big families, about, well, I didn't need to explain it, do I? Michael doesn't want to stand there and listen to this, and he wants to leave. And didn't he say something else? This is where Don says, he's making fun of them and saying, if you pay peanuts, you're going to attract monkeys. And that's the line that really Ed. He's sick and tired of it. He's had enough. He confronts them and he says, say it again, and everyone suddenly stops, and Ray comes over and he's trying to sort of cover the cracks. I don't know how Ray has not seen this happening. I don't know if Ray's one of these guys that just lets things like that slide, or sort of says, oh, but you know, lads will be lads, or you know, if it's not my problem, I'm going to ignore it, or whether he genuinely hasn't seen Don be racist.
Don's been being so evidently.
I really think that Don is the kind of guy
it.
that would joke with anyone who was white about black people.
It wouldn't. Exactly. I would be shocked if he hadn't joked with Ray about it.
And Ray's the kind of guy who would be like, look, whatever. He'd probably laugh about it and say, just don't say it in front of anybody who's going to take offence to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's all good banter. So anyway, he's trying to diffuse it, and Don's protesting, saying that he's not racist. He just happens to be a person who says racist things from time to time. And then Ed says
he launches into this magnificent off-the-cuff monologue where he talks about all the racist abuse that he's had to suffer from through his life, and
everybody is silent and lets him.
Yeah, he just lists all these things that he's had to put up with, and it all kind of, a lot of it seems like petty little things and people sort of just making a joke, and he's like, well, I'm sick of it. People have asked me this, that and the other. They've made fun of the way I look, they've made fun of my voice, they've asked and I've just had enough. And it makes you think, doesn't it? And that he's had to put up with just these little things all your life that sometimes people might have been racist saying these things. Some of the people think they're just teasing.
But this is the thing that you have to consider, that perhaps you might not if you've never had to worry about it. But I said this before on the show about having to think to yourself, do I give them the benefit of the doubt? Is this just them being a rude bastard, or are they actually being racist? Like what he was saying about putting the change down on the counter instead of putting it in their hand. Like if somebody did that to me, I'd be like, that's rude. But he has to think to himself, are they racist, or are they just rude and ignorant? You don't know, and that mental toil adds to the burden of and you don't know, because it's not like it was in the old days where you get beaten with a pool cue and that's how you knew people were being racist. It's all these subtle little insidious ways that people are racist, and he has had his fill of it. Don tries to say I'm sorry, and
he just kind of whispers it, because he's stayed silent throughout all of this, and you were commenting that it didn't quite work.
Well, we'll talk about that at the end.
Don's been kind of caught off guard with this, and he knows that everyone's looking at him, and he thinks he's been able to get away with it. And I think at this moment he's realised that everyone's against him at the moment.
Well, he's been hiding
all he can
behind
do is kind of whisper, "I'm sorry."
This thing that plausible deniability. Is he just teasing, or is he being racist? Well, he's being racist, isn't he? So Ed says, sorry for saying it, for thinking it, or for being it. And then he says, shove your apology, it's as pathetic as you are. And then they all sort of sweep out and go back. So Michael goes back to the house, number 3, and then everybody else goes to the Rovers. So at number 3, Michael tells Grace about Ed, and he kind of makes this impassioned speech to Tiana about standing up.
Yeah, basically.
And,
don't you let people say these things to you. You need to stand up and fight.
And Grace is overcome with moisture.
Dormant feelings about Michael.
She's so inspired by his...
That's the man I had a baby with.
And she gives him a big old smackaroonie, but then they both look pretty surprised. So I don't know where that's going to go. I think Grace was
I'm sure we'll find out in about 4 months' time when we next see Grace on the show.
I don't know what... Well, we're going to talk about whether we want them to get back together in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an interesting development. Then back at the Rovers, Aggie is telling him that he did the right thing. He's not so sure that it wasn't a bad idea. And then Dev comes over and he starts telling him about his experiences, basically in solidarity of saying, you're not crazy, this is happening. Because I guess people like Don are gaslighting, oh no, I wasn't being racist, you're just interpreting it wrong, and but they both know exactly what's going on. Oh, it must be so infuriating. So he just sort of talks about his experiences, but then he kind of leaves them alone.
He gives the whole thing about, people have always told me to go back where I come from. Where do you mean, Birmingham?
Yeah. James is at the bar by himself, and he says to Emma, people being racist, you know what that's like. And Emma's like, no, I don't really know, but I do think it's a bit weird when people touch my hair without asking me first.
Well, I said well, Emma, you do that.
You do that to other people.
You've groped both Seb's and Ken's hair in the past year, I remember. But
yeah, well, you know that it's different when white people want to touch black people's hair.
Yeah.
So
I can't. It's interesting that Emma had that reaction because she's such a naive character, and maybe she has, experienced it but not noticed.
Yeah, it can be subtle, like we said, but it could just be that she's been very fortunate. And I think that there was an interview with Trevor
Michael George
about this, and he said it was it was good to show a spectrum of reactions and experiences, and like you can't treat all black people the same and act as though there's a universal black experience, because there isn't, and different people will have different experiences, even based on like how they present and the colour of their skin. And perhaps people don't clock Emma as black sometimes because I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that was the interview on the Corrie Good News, wasn't it, that we watched?
And there was also an interview on the Corrie blog as well, Coronation Street.
Oh yeah.
Blog about.
Still waiting for our mention on Corrie Good News, Colson just said.
So we're not going to get a mention.
Everyone else got a mention.
We're too critical. So like I said, it's really good that they talk about it, and they're not trying to speak on behalf of everybody, but to acknowledge that even different classes of people and different areas you live in and who you hang around with is going to change how you experience life, which should seem obvious, but it's good that Coronation Street made it clear there. Yeah. So Aggie tries to get James to make amends with Ed, but he doesn't want to talk to him. Then we have this, I found this infuriating, conversation between Dev and Kevin, and Abby is there as well, I think. Yeah. I can't remember who else.
I think it was just those three. Yeah.
It was. I thought it was a bit juvenile.
Kevin has been cast in the role of the caveman, the white guy that thinks, we don't have racism anymore. It's and I don't even need to think about it. It's not saying that Kevin is racist. But he's just kind of completely oblivious to the fact that it's still going on. I
thought it was a bit juvenile. I can't believe that Kevin has never seen people be racist, and he was kind of making excuses about, you people who are racist get told off, so it's okay.
I think that fitted Kevin's personality.
Well, I know, but I just found it a bit offensive
because Kevin isn't very woke as Dev put it.
No, and I just thought it felt a bit like we're supposed to be happy that Kevin learned something, but I just thought, well, you should bloody open your eyes, I'm not going to celebrate you learning something like that.
But by the time they got to the Kev part in this, it did feel like we were being lectured a little bit too much.
I really think that's probably what I had the problem with. I felt it was just overkill.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we've had it with Dev, we've had Emma talking about it now, and we've had all the Baileys, obviously, and now Kevin is... Yeah, it felt...
It was just felt like I would say being taught.
On the whole, I thought the episode really, really worked for me. I thought it was a very powerful episode, but yeah, there were just a few points where I was thinking, I get it.
Don't know if we need this, but it is. To consider it as a real conversation, I can certainly imagine that it would have struck Kevin as shocking and odd that this goes on. And I've got friends who don't realise that how racism still exists. It's crazy. One thing I didn't like though is when Kevin started saying, "Oh, where does it come from? But babies aren't born racist," and I thought that was a really, really disingenuous thing to say, because if you look it up, actually racism and prejudice is inherent in almost every single person, and I think it's so dangerous to deny that we have inherent biases, because if you think that babies are born innocent and pure, and you forget that human beings have thought processes and ways that we behave in groups that enable racism and make it what it is. Like I'm not saying it's like natural as in a good thing. Like being aggressive is a natural human thing. We need to understand our human nature and fight against it and overcome it by acknowledging it exists, not pretending that we don't have these things. If you look it up, if you even just Google "Our baby's racist," you'll see that at a very early age, people show biases towards different groups depending on what groups they were raised in. And also, if you do, there are like various quizzes you can do, like inherent bias tests, and you will probably find out some shocking things about yourself. But I think that it's really important to not make out that it's a problem that other people have, but to question yourself all the time, because you have to be vigilant about your own prejudices and not make out that it's some kind of evil thing that only other people do. And it's not just somebody in a bar saying stupid rubbish. It's everything that Ed has spoken about in his life that has happened to him, and also his worries for Michael and James and Tiana as well.
I wonder whether Kev would have talked about this kind of thing when Play School, Freddie Smith was working with him in the garage, because he was there working with Kev for like a year or so, and you wonder whether that would have come up in conversation at all, because I imagine that he would have certainly had some racist experiences in his past.
I know,
so for Kevin to say...
No, but this is the other thing as well. I think Kevin was kind of right in what he said when he said I think he said something about you don't know what to say, or you're worried about saying the wrong thing, and then Dev kind of interrupts him and says, look, you've got to talk about it. And I think that's really important. I don't know that it would have been a comfortable conversation for Kev and Freddie to have had a discussion about Freddie's experience with racism through his life. It's not something that comes up naturally.
No, maybe not. And
Kevin seems to have had his head in the clouds. He probably wouldn't have even noticed if anybody had been racist towards Freddie if it was subtle enough. So, yeah, and it was kind of like Dev was kind of giving Kevin permission to kind of like say the wrong thing perhaps in trying to find out more about it. But I think that's the other thing, that white people are generally very uncomfortable about talking about racism and finding out about it.
Yeah, they also think, am I going to come across as being racist if I ignorant. Say that I want to know about racism?
But equally, it's not black people's job to educate white people about racism.
No.
So, it's Kevin's kind of right to be cautious, because you can't just ask anybody and expect them to spend the emotional time and labour explaining their experiences. What Dev said, it's good. It's important to talk about it, and it is really important to talk about it. But and so this is a really good episode from that perspective, because there's lots to unpack here, and it feels to me a bit like the air has been cleared a little bit. And maybe because we all know that the Baileys have been issues-based storylines. Like most of their stuff has been based around homophobia or racism. And it's very important to acknowledge that they are the family that would have experienced this in a unique way that hasn't been explored on Coronation Street before. You can't pass up this opportunity to explore that. But equally, it probably feels as though, the black family, and all they get the stories about racism, and it probably feels very frustrating, because black characters have a lot more to offer in a TV show than just stories about racism and how they experience prejudice.
Well, I almost kind of hope that this gets that out the way, and maybe let's see what else.
That's what I meant when I said to clear the air. It feels like Coronation Street knows it's not going to solve racism, but it has probably educated some people like Kevin who perhaps blissfully unaware, because really, I was really harsh towards Kevin, but how would he know? If he's not a racist, then he doesn't hang around with racists, and he might not realise all those microaggressions that the Bailey family have been putting up with for their entire life. He wouldn't notice necessarily. And it's not his fault, but it's good that Coronation Street's brought it to life. to lie to me. Dev tells him there's no excuse for not being woke, and that really made me wince. I hate that word.
I hate that word as well.
Really
Who was it? Was it Abby that says, did Asher teach you that word? I did quite like Dev's look when he like proudly goes, yeah.
I kind of want Dev to go around, like we had the speak and save, I kind of want Dev to make a bunch of posters to go up in the shop like, be woke, not broke.
It's been interesting maybe to have had Asher as part of the story, particularly after the skin lightening, because that was obviously a story about
it's about the colour
race.
of her skin, literally.
Yeah, so I wonder whether that gets
that is
picked up
really
in the
interesting
future.
that Dev didn't even mention that.
Yeah.
Because that was like
Of course
the biggest
racism
thing
is
that
still
happened.
apparent. It's made my daughter almost, poison herself with these skin whitening creams last year, and you're telling me that everything's okay now, Kev, just because in your little world it is.
Oh yeah, I mean Dev was kind of being very, very what's the word I'm trying to think of? Nice. I can't think of a better word. Patient with Kevin. When Kevin's sitting there going, well, I guess people shout horrible things at football matches, and it's mostly racist European countries that comes from. And I can't believe Dev didn't rip his hair out and say, my daughter nearly killed herself because she doesn't like the colour of her skin because of the race that she was born as, and you don't think it's a problem.
I thought that when he describes things as a country as being a racist European country, that felt a bit off to me. I don't know whether...
No, but I think that's right. I think that's what people think. Like, there are countries in Europe where they are very, like, they have progressive values, and the fans are a bit more racist. But I think that it's a very handy thing for football fans in this country to hide behind, like, we're not as bad as them. I think that's a common thing. I think that's a thing that a lot of football fans think. Like, yeah, there's a problem with racism in football fandom, but it's mostly those people over there that are doing it. It's not us, and we're not as bad as they are.
Yeah, but
because
it's the people. I don't have a problem with him referencing that, but the fact that he called the country racist, and then Abby and Tyrone were like saying, "Oh, Kev, that's racist to say that." It didn't feel
that felt
like
a bit stupid because it's not
Kev
racist; it's xenophobic. Anyway,
let's carry on.
So Aggie tells Ed that she is proud of him for standing up against Don, and then we have this really. I thought this was a really. These scenes were really powerful, and I really
Lorna did a great job.
She was fantastic. She said, I wish I could be proud of you for the way you stand up for your son. Oh, that was amazing, because she was again trying to get it through to Ed, and it's taken all this time for Ed to realise that this is a parallel situation.
Yeah,
and
it could have been a bit too. It could have felt like they were beating you over the head with it, but it felt like it worked fairly naturally.
I thought this was brilliant. I know I've complained before about kind of running this story along a bit too much and everything, but it really did feel as though I did need this time to work this out. And Aggie begging him, it was so emotional and really well done.
I'm hoping that this is some kind of turning point.
This is what I want it to be. Yeah, I know. I think
because
that
they've had a rough
the line...
first year. It's been a whole year that they've been in the programme, and they've bless them, they haven't made as big an impact as I think Ian McLeod had hoped that they would have had. And there was enough great material this week, enough powerful performances from Trevor really... and Lorna and co, that this might make people think, okay, I'm going to invest in the Baileys now. A little bit like when the McDonald's came into the programme in the late 80s. Apparently not a lot of people liked them then, and it wasn't until a couple of years later when Liz had her miscarriage with baby Katie that the audience started to warm to the McDonald's. And I wonder whether this is going to be similar to that.
Yeah, I thought it was powerful and well directed and performed and written. And I really liked...
Ian Kershaw, tonight's episode, script writer.
Other bits I didn't like as much, but this bit made up for everything that I had a problem with. And like I said, I just felt like the whole thing just kind of came into a neat conclusion that really felt satisfying, emotional, felt like we were watching actual character development for the Baileys.
Yeah. And I got to see as well what people... I remember when Lorna Laidlaw got hired on Coronation Street, and people were like, Mrs. Tembe and Doctors, she's a really great character and she's a fantastic actress. And up until this point, I've been like, Aggie's all right, she's fine. But I don't feel like she'd been given quite that right scene for her to show what she can do. And I think that little booth scene, that was it.
Yeah, I really like this. And then we get another really powerful scene with Ed and James outside in the smoking shelter. He is finally ready to listen and understand what James's experience has been. And he says, you can't go on pretending to be someone you're not. And I think there was a lot of stuff that James said that you haven't written down, and I've forgotten what it was. But he was basically like saying, I don't know if I'm ready to be that. I don't know if I can be myself. And that is just the most... Because this is the thing, this is the difference, isn't it? Because Ed and James and the Baileys have no choice but to be black and have everybody see immediately and treat them accordingly, however they feel they should be treated. But James has to own being gay and admit and come out and say that's part of who I am. And he doesn't know if he's ready to do that.
I can't remember where they left it with James, because has he properly come out, or did he hide it? Because he had that meeting a few months ago with his manager and the publicity guy.
I think it's an open secret.
County. Yeah, because they talked about all the abuse that James had been getting. Yeah. on social media.
I think everybody knows that he's gay, but not officially has it come out.
That this fan a week ago that came up to him,
he's clearly seen stuff online. But yeah, I thought that was really good. Like, James is like, I've already got this identity that people want to attack me for. I don't think I've got the strength to take on another one. And Ed saying, you've got to take as long as you need to. I haven't accepted you before, but I am proud of you.
Yeah, that was a really lovely moment with the hug at the end. He says, you walk tall, eh?
Oh no, I loved that. That was amazing. And that's what James and Ed really needed this whole time. And it makes sense that it wasn't an immediate acceptance. Like, again, this is the thing. James knows, and it's because we've learned about how he's suffered because of racism. He knows that James has now got two burdens to carry, and he didn't want it to be real and true, and he kind of was hoping that he could avoid the pain of having those two things. But now I think he's realising that he thinks that James has got the strength to carry it. And he's going to support him. Yeah,
it'll be good to see Ed fighting for James. I mean, he's said this now, but when it comes to the light of day, will he actually be able to do it? Maybe not. I assume so. But it's whether... Because James has now said he wants to quit football, and to be honest, that could be an easy way out for this story, because when the homophobia in football story first reared its head back in September time, we were saying, well, there's been so few professional footballers who have come out. Would it feel weird for Coronation Street to have one? Would this not be kind of national news almost? How they're going to get round this? And maybe their way round it is to have James quit being a footballer.
Oh, I don't want him to. I wish that we could create a weather-filled world where everybody just stops being racist and and homophobic. But it's not going to happen, and it's just so sad, because it just, to know that they, like I said, there's a burden to carry and you don't choose it.
I mean,
and it's really, I feel really self-conscious about talking about this. We're both white, we haven't experienced this, and if I've said anything ignorant, I would hope that you guys forgive me, because I'm doing the best I can to try to navigate this very difficult topic and represent a group of people that I have no business representing.
Yeah.
But I think that the episodes spoke for themselves, and we know that Baroness Lawrence, as you mentioned before, the mother of Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered, was a script consultant, and it was supposed to be shown, like you said, on April the 22nd. And we also know that all the actors who played the Bailey family workshopped this together, so their input kind of like I said, the episode speaks for itself.
It did, and it certainly felt different. I'm assuming that an awful lot of the people who watched the episode or kind of weren't prepared for it and hadn't read about the
context
special...
would have made more sense if it had actually been broadcast on the day that it was scheduled to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that there are definitely going to be criticisms from people who find it a bit heavy-handed. But equally, I'm sure people would have been very affected by it.
There were times when it was a bit heavy-handed. I definitely think there was, but on the whole, I was very impressed, and I thought that all the main players, all the actors did do a good job, and I really did like Ed's speech, and it did feel a bit like, I suppose you said at the time, would people just give him the floor for that long?
That's the only thing I was going to say.
As a drama, characters do that.
I know that, and it's
play.
not because it's not necessarily, it's not the subject matter at all that I had the issue with. It was this trope that soaps and TV shows have, where they have a horrible bully who is vile and repulsive and like a caricature of the most evil things you could be, and then a character who's being slighted and the victim and the bullied, and then they get this uninterrupted glorious moment in the spotlight to just tell the person who has been so cruel to them exactly how they're wrong and what a terrible person they are, and the person who has to stand there and take it and then slink off with their tail between their legs without protesting or objecting in any way or interrupting them. I just find it so fantastical that I can't take it seriously, because everybody it is like the ultimate fantasy where you have an argument with somebody and then you play it back in your mind and you just imagine that that's what you were like, going everything you say is pitch perfect and makes total sense. You don't stutter once or repeat yourself, and you're clear about everything, and the person that you're having a go at just kind of disappears in a puff of smoke. And I just, when it happens on a show, I don't ever buy it, because that's not how it happens.
Well, don't forget, Ed had been standing in that bistro just
stood
still for like a good 8 hours preparing
waiting.
that speech.
He was running it all over it. Yeah, that's fair enough.
I thought it was good. I just love the character development that it allowed Ed to have this week.
What is it called when you... It's called in French, it's called the wit of the staircase. What's that?
I don't know.
Something escalier, something.
I don't know.
It's a phrase in French which basically means something that you think of after you've had an argument.
Yeah. No, I thought it was okay.
Like the staircase is like when you walk down the stairs after you've just had a confrontation with somebody.
Yeah, no, I thought it was okay, and I think that Don just had never been called out on it before, so he didn't have a kind of comeback prepared. Like, he's been used to and to hanging around with the people that laugh along with him, and maybe he's the sort of person that people...
Who are you talking about?
Don. The sort of people that people are scared to stand up to.
I mean,
so
maybe
he's not
the
used
kind
to
of
it.
guy that thinks that he's an equal... Like, these people who go, I'm an equal opportunity offender. I'm not racist, I hate everybody. And he's probably vile to everybody. Or is he just racist? You don't know. And this is the thing that the Baileys have dealt with their whole lives. Like, is it acceptable to criticise somebody for being lanky?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if Don is rude about other people's other physical attributes, does that give him a free pass? No, obviously it doesn't. But in Don's mind, it does. Perhaps. We don't know. I don't think Don's ever going to get fleshed out for us to find out what his true feelings are. But
it'll be interesting to see whether Ray keeps him on. I think it'll say a lot about Ray's character.
Yeah.
But that whole storyline has really kind of gone off a cliff these past few months, hasn't it? Because Ray has still got a master plan for taking over the street.
Yeah. Well, we have all these grand theories and conspiracies and things.
Is he going to keep Don on as his little sidekick
I think
evil?
Ray wants to win the street denizens over, and he it would be such an easy win for him to just fire Don and sort of ingratiate himself in people's hearts by being the guy that got rid of the nasty racist. But actually, Ray's probably cultivated the the culture at work that has allowed Don to feel so bold with his disgusting opinions.
Yeah, I mean, Ray's probably the sort that has been talking in the back.
It's just a bit of a laugh. Can you imagine what they say?
Making horrible comments about women.
I was going to say, can you imagine what they say about women?
Yeah,
when
talking about Faye
listening?
or whoever. Yeah, so Don probably feels very comfortable. Not that Don's been there for very long, I suppose. But maybe Ray will be...
Good old disposable racist.
Yeah. So maybe they are going to be on to their third Bistro manager in as many months soon.
And I mean, it's interesting to think about the last time they tried to do a racism storyline and it fell on its bum.
This is no play the white man.
No, I know, but we spoke about it because we uploaded a character profile of Lloyd, but it was on a YouTube channel, so maybe people haven't heard us talking about that again recently. But the Play the White Man story was a story in which you had Lloyd, who was the black character, and Paul, who's the white firefighter guy, who's kind of it seemed like a wholesome and cool guy. And then they were playing darts, and something happened, and Paul said, "Don't play the white man," which was...
No, he says, "Do play the white man."
Play the white man. I still don't understand.
It just means phrase. Be fair, mate.
Yeah, so kind of like likening fair play with being white, and therefore saying that... And he didn't realise that Lloyd might take offence to that because he didn't see race, which is like one of the most racist things to say. But that... is interesting because they used an existing character that had already built up a bit of sympathy and background on the show, Paul, to say the racist thing. And this is contrasting with Don, who we don't care about and we just think is an awful person. And there really is no subtlety or kind of like nuance as to whether he meant to be racist or not. It doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. It's all about the Baileys. And in that way, it's centering their experience as black people in a way that the Lloyd storyline didn't, and perhaps that was the problem with why the Lloyd storyline the racist storyline just kind of went nowhere before, because they weren't centering Lloyd's experiences enough.
The biggest problem with that was just the term that was used, to play the white man, which was...
Well, I mean, to be fair, Don wasn't exactly full of zingers, was he?
That's true.
Fresh Prince, Lenny Henry. I mean, it was lazy.
I think you said in the YouTube thing they were trying to avoid being racist by saying a term that actually people don't actually use anymore, and then it just came across as being a little bit antiquated. What you were saying,
trying to do something about that's offensive without offending people.
Yeah.
And there's shades of that here as well.
Yeah.
But it wasn't about that. It was about, like I said, microaggressions and constantly being on your guard and never knowing when the next insult's going to come and who is it going to come from. Somebody that I trust and
just quickly before we move on then, the Grace angle.
Oh yeah, they're going to get together.
I mean, I don't really care because I really haven't warmed to Grace at all, and she doesn't seem to be presented in the way that I'm supposed to be warming to her. She seems a bit of a stuck-up cow, doesn't she? But we've seen so little of her. I don't know. I don't care one way or another really, but I'm glad that just something happened at least. So, maybe. I still wonder whether she's going to end up getting killed though.
Why?
Well, just because of having Michael being landed with Tiana.
Oh, okay.
Seems like a bit of a soapy thing to do, but I mean, so she could be on her last leg. Same with Arthur. I think I'm wondering whether anything's going to happen with him now because of everything going so nicely.
I think I know what's going to happen with Arthur and Grace.
Do you?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
I do, because we know that Arthur's a serial killer, and you just said that Grace is going to die. Seems to me pretty obvious. 2 birds with one stone. Fine. Right, so that's almost it for this week's Street Talk, but we have had a few other little stories that are worth mentioning as well. For example, the Winter Blues this week. Gemma, we last saw her at the postnatal depression group where she listens to one of these other women opening up about the experiences that she'd had, and Gemma was like, oh, I'm not the only person that's got this. So now she's got the floor on Monday's episode, and she talks to the group about how hard it is and how her life turned out so much differently to how she'd imagined. She always dreamed of being a Spice Girl. I don't know how that little route took her down being a gangster's mole,
in the dodgy estates
trying
of
to be scary
Weatherfield.
Spice.
Oh, of course. Yeah, which Spice Girl did Gemma? I put on a poll on Twitter the other day. I think of which Spice Girl did Gemma dream that she was being, and I think Scary Spice did win that one. A couple of votes for Posh. See how did Gemma want to be Posh Spice?
Maybe that's probably why she felt like her dreams were unachievable, so she decided to go completely the opposite route.
Maybe. Anyway, Gemma goes back home and she has a nice little scene with Chesney. Chesney says, Gemma says, I didn't realise that depression could come in many shapes and forms. My nan had depression, but she couldn't even get out of bed half the time. But anyway, she's feeling better now. So it almost felt at the end of Monday's episode that she's been cured of her postnatal depression just by being able to talk about it. But Wednesday's episode gives her one more chance to really get that postnatal depression out of her system, which is basically...
Well, she's just talking to Bernie about it.
Yeah, she talks to Bernie about it, and she's feeling positive in the morning. And when Kathy talks to her about it later, and then Sean comes into the kebab shop, and Kathy says, "Oh, let's change the subject." But Gemma's like, "I don't care who knows about my depression." So,
well, she says she wants everyone to know.
Yes, which Sean helps her with by suggesting that she does a vlog about it.
And he's wearing tinfoil.
That helped me when I was having my issues-based story. Do you remember that, everybody? Do you remember I was homeless for a couple of weeks? No, I don't remember that either.
Did he?
I honestly, I don't know. Anyway, so Gemma thinks this is a spiffy idea, so it doesn't have to give it a second thought. The very next scene, they're up there with the camera and they're filming her ad-libbing this incredibly eloquent monologue. This was the week of the monologues, wasn't it? It was Ed and Gemma just off the cuff saying these magnificent speeches. This one being about how rubbish Freshcos are and about how the dream world that is suggested in the adverts. I mean, the advert literally is just them against the green background.
I feel as though Freshcos has been falsely accused of doing an actually good advertising campaign. They never once made Gemma and Chesney's life look idyllic and like the kind of thing that you would want to buy into.
Well, the closest that they had was that they had the video, didn't they? Remember when they went to the video screening, which was when Chesney said that enough is enough, but that was just badly done, wasn't it?
Because it was awful. The whole thing's awful. So I found this reductive and insulting.
Anyway, Gemma says Freshcos tried to make out that we live in a dream world, but actually we don't.
Yeah, it's fantasy.
Yeah.
As though anybody watching anything on their phone via YouTube or whatever wouldn't have been introduced already to the concept that advertising perhaps sells you a false idea of the results of buying the product.
No, I know.
Like, if
have they not watched The Apprentice? That's the whole idea. When it's the advert task, you need to show the consumers' lives being better at the end because of it, but we all know it's not really real.
I think the problem was that she just kind of seemed to stop after saying this isn't reality. And you don't need to feel bad if this is not what your real life is like. Like, we know this. Yeah, and the other problem is that Gemma isn't depressed because of some kind of dichotomy between what her imagined life as a Freshcos mum was and her reality, because we know that was fake all the time for her. She always knew that was rubbish. She didn't really ever have any big ambitions about raising a child. She just wanted to be able to do it, and she can't. She wasn't lulled into a false sense of security or think that she would be swanning around wearing hand-washed silk blouses while nursing 4 children.
Yeah, it felt...
And you don't get postnatal depression from aspiring to be the lady in the Olay adverts. It's an imbalance in the chemicals in your brain.
Yeah, whereas
it's not
this story,
caused by watching adverts.
I may be wrong, but this story, these scenes this week seemed to suggest that everything's okay now. And doing a vlog doesn't quite. For one thing, I think it was quite. I don't know whether anyone would ever care. Coronation Street's got a thing that when anyone does something for social media, everybody finds out about it. When in real life, you can put out the most brilliant tweet and nobody likes it at all.
I think,
and it doesn't get picked up on by Corrie Good News, Colson Smith.
I think the fact that she was the Freshcos face of you know, and then she's standing up against it, would naturally bring some media attention. But again, she seems to be scapegoating Freshgos as the kind of architect of her destruction, when actually they had nothing to do with it, and they just wanted to give her money to be in a picture. And she doesn't seem to, and Coronation Street still seems to be wanting to make a villain out of Freshgos for wanting to sell more pasta, like as though they've done something wrong. They haven't.
Well, one of the things I didn't like about it as well was that I liked Gemma's positivity at the beginning of the week, and she was feeling like she turned a corner and I can do this, and I'm feeling positive, and then that just translated into her slagging off Freshco.
Yeah,
like, oh,
well, look, and also
you can be negative now.
It really, if I forgive this storyline if we're building to some depth here, where Gemma perhaps has a relapse and finds that some days she feels good and some days she feels bad, and we actually have that explored some way, and you know, she might feel disheartened next week when she doesn't feel like making a vlog or getting out of bed or anything. But it just felt very simplistic and fake, that you can just take a pill and go to one counselling session and then
do a vlog and then
immediately
you're better.
know the source of your problems is Freshco, and if you do a video about it, you're gonna.
Gemma, are you saying you want to see more Gemma scenes where they really? Do you want her to have a two-hander with Chesney?
How dare you suggest that? But no, I think it's a bit unfair to people who have suffered with depression, and particularly postnatal depression, to tie this up so neatly. And it's so simplistic, considering how much work they've done and how much they've invested in Gemma as a character, and to just kind of end it with I went to therapy once and now
sometimes
I'm
they
fine.
have to, speed things up a little bit in the
Sometimes
soaps.
they do, but I don't see the benefit then of doing it at all. I know this was a week of wall-to-wall issues, and it's nice when Coronation Street does them, and it's very important and it's great. But at the same time, if you're watching a week of learning about mitochondrial disease, finding out why everybody's racist, and what it's like to live as a gay black man in the UK today, and also being taught about what it's like to have postnatal depression, after a while you start to wonder why you're even watching the show, because you could just Google or just go onto itv.com/advice and just learn about it there without but where's at least with I guess it mirrors the Bailey storyline, where you feel like at the end of it Ed kind of really did develop his character. Gemma here, no, I don't feel like she's learned anything. She's still harping on the same old thing about Freshgos. I think it would be powerful if we find out after the fact that she was being naive about her speed of recovery, because that is very much authentic to the experience. You will have ups and downs, and you might get carried away at the beginning when you feel like better for the first time in months. You suddenly feel okay again. You don't feel miserable and awful, and then you might relapse, and that would be more powerful to me.
Well, we'll just have to see, won't we?
I wanted to get sued by Freshgos.
I know.
If I was that Freshgos lady, I'd bloody murder her. She will not shut up about how Freshgos advert was a lie. Everybody knows it.
Right. We just wanted to mention Sean's weird jacket in this story.
It was not right for TV.
No, that jacket I don't think works. I don't think he needs to wear that again, because it didn't quite look right on cameras. It looked like it had some Photoshop effect.
It did. It
layered
looked
on
like
top
one of those
it.
ones
It was
where
bizarre.
You do the drawings, like the shading.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Right, the Evelyn storyline, Gemma, is it? I've lost track. Is it? Am I doing this
Didn't
one?
I just do Gemma?
Okay, so Tyrone is still. Tyrone's just been teasing Evelyn about this romance, not a romance, with Arthur for the last couple of months or so. And on Monday, she's just about to go out dancing with him, and it's quite sweet because he's protective of her and like saying you better treat my nana nicely, Arthur. But he wishes them a good time, and they come back later, and Evelyn's brought home some coconut pyramids. I liked it when she kind of went off to go out and then she came back and got the Tupperware tub. That was quite blanching.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Anyway, they've had a lovely time and they're left alone there downstairs, and It's just a really, really sweet scene. I love anything Arthur and Evelyn, and he's like, you've got a lot softer in your old age, and Evelyn doesn't let him think he's right, even though she has, and she clearly is sweet on him, but she's still just... She doesn't want to break character almost to admit it.
She calls herself an equal opportunity tyrant, and perhaps I just need to insert a little asterisk there to say not in the same way that Don probably thinks he is.
Yeah, she's saying, "Well, don't you sound gone soft? I've got a reputation to keep up. I'm horrible to men. I'm horrible to women. I'm an equal opportunity tyrant." Anyway, he says, "I can see right through you, are Evelyn." And Wednesday, he's there eating breakfast when Tyrone comes downstairs.
His feet right under the table.
Yeah, and Tyrone makes some comments about that, as you can expect, and Evelyn's very quick to point out that no, Arthur is just stopping off here on the way to the medical centre.
Oh, he's going to die.
Well, yeah, and there's just more teasing, basically. I'm kind of watching this going, I want more of this story, because it's sweet. Everything with Evelyn and Arthur is sweet.
Something's going to happen.
I know.
I think something horrible is going to happen.
This has been built up into such a lovely, idyllic situation.
I think
I want them to have...
He's going to have a dark secret, or he's going to die.
I'd like them to have a bit of a nice story first. You know, it
just
doesn't
to
feel...
really make it feel bad when he dies.
Because we haven't seen much of a story with them. It's just getting to know each other. And I think if we were lulled into a false sense of security a little bit before they started foreshadowing something awful happening, and maybe it's just because, you know, we're seasoned soap watchers and we know that this kind of romance never works out. I don't know. It reminds me a little bit of Rita going out with Ted Sullivan back in the 90s, and he was like the perfect gentleman, and he swept her off her feet, and then she found out that he had a brain tumour, and that felt fairly quick, but I did feel like...
Didn't he want to marry her or go on holiday?
Yeah, he wanted to marry her and take her off to Florida.
That's right.
And then she was like, "I'm not moving to Florida if you're going to die there, and then I'll be left away with all my friends. There's only so many trips I can take to Magic Kingdom."
Rita never really put together that you could just go back home.
But that felt to me like it was built up soon and slowly enough, their relationship, before the tragedy really struck in, and I'm not getting that yet with Evelyn and Arthur.
I wonder if it will be along the same lines as that. Like, in my mind, I've just suddenly thought maybe Arthur knows he's dying, and he wants to marry Evelyn so she can inherit his money.
Maybe.
Or his wife is dying.
What?
Yeah, he's got a wife, and she's dying, but he doesn't like her, and he wants to move on before she's dead, kind of like Paul. Or, like I said before, he is a serial killer, and he needs somebody to cover for him when he's off, like during countdown.
You're gonna be insufferable when it turns out that he is actually a serial killer.
The thing is, of all the things I can think of, that's the one that would be tragic, but also really fun and interesting. Because actually, if Evelyn found out that this guy that she fell for is a serial killer, it would be horrible and tragic, but it would also kind of like harden her shell even more. Like, you can't trust anybody. And it would be unusual, because I think it would be
interesting to see that we've seen her open up, which I'm enjoying, but to have something happen that hardens her.
And the only things I can think of are all medical related, and we've already had enough medical tragedies.
Watching Coronation Street, watching 2010's Coronation Street all this time, just... You can't think of anything else other than medical issues. Yeah,
I know, and it's weird because that's all they ever seem to have. Of time in which Coronation Street didn't really do any medical storylines at all.
No,
and it was blissful and wonderful. And I mean, we've been watching classic, vintage Corrie for how many years now?
15.
Nobody's had anything wrong with them.
Well, Vera Lomax wouldn't.
Well, Vera Lomax died, but nobody cared about her. Apart
until
from
May Hardman.
Really. Yes, but there's no like lingering illnesses and hospital visits, and they managed to make a TV show that was quite popular for 15 years without having to rely on people dying like clockwork of mysterious ailments.
Well, we're making assumptions just because everything seems to be going nicely, but you never know. Maybe this is just going to be
I'm saying don't do
feel-good story.
No, because that doesn't happen.
In amongst all the rest of the tragedy that the other street residents are going through in 2020.
There's no such thing as a happy ending for a relationship on a soap.
Well, I just think that the actor that they've got playing Arthur, and I can't remember what his name is quite a big name. And although so is Maureen Lipman, I'm thinking, are they going to keep him in the show, or is he just a guest
Going to run
spot?
out of budget.
Yeah, I wonder.
I know.
Can I, before we move on, and we're pretty much at the end now, I want to give a bit of credit to Evelyn's line, "Get some Lux Flakes and wash your mind out," which she says to Tyrone when he's making fun of Arthur staying overnight. That was a good one. That's basically it. All that happened in the Street Fighter story was David's been on his run with Craig, and he admits that he's running away from these scallies is what's giving him a buzz, and Craig says,
do drugs.
Craig says, don't think too much, get on with each other and have some fun. That's my advice for life.
Get on with each other and have some fun?
Yeah.
Get on with who?
Other human beings.
What if
don't taunt them.
What if they're Don?
Don't take any more risks, David. And that was all we had with that, literally. So nothing much to say there. And that is it.
I think Craig should get a job working for the greetings card industry. That could cover any kind of event, couldn't it?
Very true. And he could even design the front cover, because Craig's an excellent artist.
Yeah.
Apparently, I don't know whether he's lost that skill since he's become a special constable. Okay, so what are we rating this week then?
It's tricky. There were some really powerful moments, and I am glad that we had the Bailey stuff, because even though I felt at times it was a bit clumsy, it was still really powerful, and it was important, and you can't ignore that part of the Bailey's experience. As if they were real people, they would have this experience, and it is reductive to kind of always put these storylines to characters like that, but you can't pretend it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I'm glad that they've done it, and I kind of now I want to put that to one side and let the Baileys explore other parts of their family life and things that are perhaps a bit more unique to them specifically.
Yeah.
Because we had a little bit of that with the Bailey when Ed was doing his gambling.
For all of 2 episodes.
For 2 episodes, and then he realised he didn't like Foxy Bingo. But yeah, a bit more stuff that's just really specific to the Baileys, not generally their experiences.
Well, Aggie is involved in the Ollie story, isn't she? Yeah. She's lingering around the children's ward. I
think that's really good as well, that they put her in that story, and we're seeing her at work.
There hasn't been much crossover. Interestingly, when she phoned up Ed last week and said, "Oh, I'm going to be coming home late because this is happening with Ollie," nothing's happened there, has it? But there's going to, I assume there'll be some crossover somehow. So I'm going to give Ed my character of the week this week, just for standing up to Don.
Me too.
I felt it was a really interesting dichotomy with do I just sit back and take it? Is that for the best? Did you just let them? Is it better to just let people say their thing, because sticks and stones may break my bones, blah, blah, blah. And Michael saying, no, you got to fight. I was thinking, what would I do if I was in Ed's position? And I'm probably the sort of person that would just take it.
And,
whereas you would probably fight back, wouldn't you?
Well, there's arguments to be made for both.
I wouldn't say Ed is wrong.
If you take it onto yourself to stand up every time that happens, you're going to be fighting for the rest of your life. And Michael's young, and he hasn't experienced as much as Ed is. And who is he to tell Ed that he is wrong when Ed has so much more life experience? But equally, Michael's
got
of
the
a
scars
generation.
To show it.
Yeah, but equally, Michael is of a generation where it's brilliant that Michael doesn't just want to accept that, baseline that Ed's decided is an acceptable level of racism to exist in, and Michael has higher standards, and the hope that we're left with when Michael spoke to Grace and Tiana is that Tiana's level will be, a higher one than Michael has had to endure until we get to the stage where.
Yeah.
Not that will ever happen, but wouldn't it be lovely if that did? But you can only fight bit by bit and take the fight from where you are. And Ed has been so used to this not being a big deal.
Yeah. So for Ed's real character development and standing up for his family and finally accepting James. I'm going to give him character of the week this week, and I'm going to score it. It's hard because there was some really powerful stuff, but I think it felt like a heavy week, and there wasn't much light.
There wasn't any joyous light and funny.
Apart from the Evelyn and Arthur, that was the shining moment of everything's going to be okay in the week. But I'm going to give it...
Even Gemma kind of supposedly overcoming her depression just rang false and hollow to me.
You give your score first, because I sometimes feel like I give my score, then you usually give half a point higher than me, so I want to see where...
Well, I think I'm going to give it 3.5.
See, I was going to say 3.5.
Mongolian throat singers.
Nice. That was supposed to be a moment of lightness as well. I that didn't work for me, but 3.5 Mongolian throats. I'm going to give it 3.5 equal opportunity tyrants out of 5.